Tisa Bennett just turned 50 years old. And not only does this woman look like she could pass for someone's college roommate, she recently went viral for posting photos that King Von would absolutely not have approved of. Bold, unapologetic. The kind of content that would have had Von in her DMs immediately telling her to take it down. But here's what makes this whole thing even more layered. This same woman inherited King Von's masters when he passed. His entire music catalog. Which means every time one of his songs gets streamed, every time it plays on the radio, every time it gets licensed for a show, a film, or a commercial, she is getting paid. Von literally made his mother financially set for life before he left this earth. And on top of all of that, there is a deep and largely unexamined beef situation involving FBG Duck's mother that the internet has not fully unpacked. We are getting into every piece of it today, but before we get into everything happening with Tisa right now, we need to go back. Because if you only know her as King Von's mother, you are genuinely missing the foundation of this entire story. Tisa Bennett is the mother of Dion Daquan Bennett, the man the world knows as King Von. And Von grew up in one of the most notorious housing projects in the country, Parkway Gardens on the south side of Chicago. You know it as O Block. And if you know anything about O Block, you already understand that growing up there is not something most people could survive mentally, emotionally, or physically. This was one of the most dangerous communities in one of the most violent cities in America. And Tisa was right there in the middle of it, raising her children. She was a young mother without many resources, navigating a level of day-to-day pressure that most people watching this genuinely cannot fathom. Poverty that does not give you breaks. Violence that lives outside your front door. A kind of stress that follows you into your sleep. And through all of it, Tisa showed up. She kept her family together in conditions specifically designed to pull families apart. Von felt that. He saw what his mother was going through, and he carried her with him. If you have ever listened to his music closely, if you paid attention to what he said in interviews, that relationship was everything to him. He talked about wanting to change his mother's life, about getting her out of that environment, about making sure she never had to worry about anything ever again. That was not just rapper talk. That was something he genuinely meant and genuinely worked toward. But here is what makes Tisa's story complicated from the very beginning. She was not just Von's mother. She was a woman raising a family in a war zone, watching her son become famous, watching the world fall in love with him. And then on November 6, 2020, she had to bury him. King Von was shot and killed outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta, Georgia. He was 26 years old. And in an instant, everything changed. In the aftermath of his death, Tisa did not have the luxury of disappearing into her grief. She had an estate to manage, a legacy to protect, a catalog to oversee. She had children to take care of and a public that was looking to her for some acknowledgement, some continuity, some proof that Dion Daquan Bennett was not just going to become a name people forgot in 6 months. And she stepped up. But we will get to all of that. First, let's talk about the bag. This is the part that genuinely stops people in their tracks when they fully understand it. Because a lot of people know on a surface level that Von's mother inherited his estate. But I don't think people truly grasp what that means in terms of real, ongoing, generational wealth. When King Von passed, his music catalog did not die with him. And this is something a lot of people do not understand about the music industry. When an artist with real cultural weight passes, their catalog often becomes more valuable, not less. The demand for their music does not disappear. The streams keep coming. The placements keep coming. The licensing deals keep coming. And in Von's case, his music was already massive when he died, and it only grew in the years that followed. Tisa inherited King Von's masters. And for anyone not familiar with what that means, masters are the original recordings of songs. Owning the masters means you own the actual source material. Every time a Von song gets streamed on Spotify or Apple Music, every time it plays on a radio station, every time it gets licensed for a TV show, a film, a video game, or a YouTube video, the person who owns those masters receives a portion of that money. And that person is his mother. I am not exaggerating when I say King Von made Tisa rich for life. Not comfortable. Not doing okay. Rich. Permanently. This was the promise he made while he was alive. That he was going to take care of his family. That he was going to make sure they never struggled the way they struggled in O Block. And even after leaving this earth at 26 years old, he fulfilled it. And I want to pause here for a second because I think it is important to hold both things at once. That is genuinely beautiful. The idea that a son's love and talent and hard work can continue providing for his family even after he is gone. That is legacy in the truest sense of the word. But it is also painful, because nobody would trade their child for a catalog. Nobody would look at that money and feel like the exchange was fair. Tisa would give every cent of it back to have her son here. That is just the reality. But the fact that Vaughn's artistry continues to take care of the people he loved most, that means something real. That is worth acknowledging out loud. So when you see Tisa out here living her best life, posting content, building a platform, going viral, just know that the foundation underneath all of that is something her son built with his own 2 hands. And that is a fact you cannot argue with. Now here is the part that broke the internet. And honestly, I completely understand why. Because what Tisa did for her 50th birthday was not what most people expected. Here is the setup. Tisa recently turned 50 years old. Half a century. The big 5-0. And when most people hit that milestone, they post a birthday photo, maybe throw a dinner, celebrate with family. Normal. Dignified. Nothing too crazy. But Tisa came in a completely different direction. She went viral after sharing photos of her completely natural body. And the internet could not handle it. Not in a negative way either, at least not initially. In a genuine shock and awe kind of way. People in the comment sections were absolutely losing it because this woman does not look 50. She does not look close to 50. She genuinely looks like she could be in her early 30s. And if someone told you she was 34, you would not question it for a single second. But what made this moment more than just a viral photo is what she said alongside it. Tisa was using her growing platform to actually inspire women. She was speaking directly to them about embracing their natural figures, about feeling confident in their bodies without relying on filters or heavy editing or procedures that get hidden and denied. She was showing up as herself, unapologetically, and saying this is what 50 looks like when you put in the work and love yourself. And that message landed hard. Her birthday content went massively viral, and the celebrations in the comment sections were real. Fans were guessing she was 32, 35, maybe 38, and she was sitting right there at 50. That is not an accident. That is not genetics doing all the heavy lifting. That is a woman who has put in dedicated, consistent work on herself. And now that she has the time, the resources, and the peace of mind that Vaughn's success provided her, she is showing the world what that dedication looks like. But the internet is never fully one thing. There was also a section of people who felt some type of way about the photos. Some felt it was a little too much for the mother of one of rap's most beloved artists. And if you knew Vaughn's personality, you understand where that reaction comes from. Vaughn was protective, openly protective of the women in his life. He had strong feelings about how the women in his circle were perceived publicly. So the idea of his mother posting that kind of content had people saying without question that Vaughn would not have been comfortable with it. And honestly, that is a fair conversation to have. Both things exist at the same time. You can celebrate a 50-year-old woman glowing up and living freely while also acknowledging that the son she lost might have had a very different opinion about those photos. That duality is just part of this story. But what nobody can deny is that Tisa is commanding attention. She has built a following. She has a platform she is actively using. And the internet cannot look away. At 50 years old, after everything she has been through, after burying her son and carrying that grief for years, if she wants to step out and feel herself, who is actually stopping her? Now let's shift gears because this next part is where things get genuinely heavy. And I need you to follow closely because there are a lot of layers here. Let's talk about FBG Duck and his mother, Lasha Weekly, known online as Mama Duck. FBG Duck, whose real name was Carlton Weekly, was a Chicago rapper who was shot and killed in August of 2020 on the Magnificent Mile. In broad daylight, in a crowded shopping district. Captured on camera. Completely brazen. And it happened just a few months before King Von himself was killed in November of that same year. 2020 took a lot from Chicago. Mama Duck became a very public figure in the wake of losing her son. She sat down for interviews, including a significant one with No Jumper, and she did not hold back on what she believed about what happened and who was responsible. She addressed the rumors directly. The allegation that King Von had put $100,000 on FBG Duck's head. That Von was allegedly behind the hit. And her position was clear. She said, in her own words, they proved it. She also said that the people allegedly behind the shooting had been telling on themselves for a long time before anything was officially established. That is a serious allegation. That is not something you throw out casually in an interview. And the fact that Mama Duck said it publicly in content that is sitting on YouTube right now for anyone to find, that created an enormous amount of attention and controversy around Vaughn's name and legacy. It put people who love Vaughn on the defensive, and it put Tisa in a very uncomfortable position because she is the one holding the estate, holding the name, protecting the legacy. But here is the part that genuinely surprised me, and that I think a lot of people missed in all the noise. Mama Duck's tone in those interviews was not purely hostile. She was not out there simply trying to tear Vaughn's family apart. When you actually listen to what she said, it came from a place of grief that is impossible to fake. She said that the deaths of both her son and King Vaughn did nothing but hurt their families. She said she felt betrayed by the person who allegedly shared her son's location. And then she said something that hit completely different. She said that people losing their lives over a song is unnecessary. Over a song. Think about that for a second. She was speaking to the idea that so much of the tension between the two camps was rooted in music, in lyrics and diss tracks and public callouts. And her position was that none of it was worth what it ultimately cost. She said losing both of them only hurts their close families. She said she feels lost and consumed by all of it. That is not beef energy. That is a grieving mother trying to make sense of something that will never fully make sense. So framing this as simply Vaughn's mom versus Duck's mom is way too simple. The actual deeper tension came through the legal system. FBG Duck's family filed a civil lawsuit against King Vaughn's estate, with real financial implications. That is what Tisa has been navigating on top of everything else. Legal proceedings involving her son's name and his money and his legacy, while she is simultaneously grieving and building and going viral and commissioning murals. The weight of that is something most of us cannot fully imagine. And yet she is still here, still moving, still holding it down. Which brings us to the part of this story that I think deserves the most respect. Because beyond the inheritance, beyond the viral photos, beyond the beef and the lawsuits, what Tisa has done to actively honor her son's memory is something that does not get talked about enough. Tisa has made it her mission to make sure that Dion Daquan Bennett is not forgotten. Not as a rapper, not as a celebrity, but as a person, as her son, and the ways she has gone about doing that are genuinely meaningful. She has been instrumental in commissioning murals of King Vaughn across Chicago. Large, vivid painted representations of his face on walls throughout the city where he grew up. And if you understand what murals mean in Chicago, in that specific culture, you understand this is not a small gesture. Murals are how communities say this person was here. This person mattered. We will not let time erase them. Tisa made sure that when people walk through Chicago, when people drive through the South Side, they see her son's face on those walls, and they remember who he was. That takes effort. That takes money. That takes showing up and coordinating and caring enough to make it happen when grief could easily have pulled her completely inward. She did it anyway. And then there is Grandson. For those who do not know, Grandson is King Vaughn's posthumous album, the project that came out after his death. Posthumous albums are complicated in ways that people outside the industry do not fully appreciate. You are sorting through unreleased recordings. You are making decisions about what the artist would have wanted included and what he would have left out. You are working with producers and label executives and managers while the world is watching and the fans have enormous expectations, and the weight of getting it wrong is very real. Tisa was a key figure in making Grandson happen. Because who on this earth is better positioned to make decisions about what Vaughn would have wanted than the woman who raised him from birth? The woman who knew him before the rap career, before the fans, before any of it. Her involvement in that project was significant, and the album exists, giving fans one more chapter of Vaughn's voice and artistry, in large part because she made sure it happened. That is not a woman who cashed the check and went quiet. That is a woman who said, "My son built something real, and I am going to make sure it endures as long as I am breathing." She keeps his name in the conversation on social media. She marks his birthdays publicly. She acknowledges the anniversaries of his passing. She shares his story with anyone who asks, and with plenty of people who did not. And in a world where attention spans are shrinking and the news cycle swallows people whole, the fact that King Vaughn's legacy is still this alive, this discussed, this present in the culture, that is not an accident. A huge piece of that is Tisa, every single day. So let me put this whole picture together. Because when you zoom out and look at everything at once, the full story of who Tisa is right now is genuinely one of the most compelling narratives in rap culture. And most people have been approaching it way too surface level. This is a woman who grew up without resources, raising children in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America, who watched her son claw his way out of that environment and become a global phenomenon, who lost that son at 26 years old and had to carry that grief publicly, who then had to manage his estate, protect his legacy, navigate a lawsuit, and respond to serious public allegations, all while figuring out who she is now that the person she lived to protect is gone. And today she is 50 years old, and she does not look it. She has King Von's masters generating income that will last for generations. She is building her own platform in her own voice. She is commissioning murals and keeping grandson in the conversation and posting photos that have the entire internet talking. She is moving through grief and through life at the same time, which is honestly the only way forward when you lose someone like that. Is everything she does universally praised? No. Are there people who think the photos went too far? Yes. Would Von have some words for her about some of it? Almost certainly. But Tisa is a whole, full, complete human being. She is not just a mother figure frozen in someone else's story. She is a woman with her own life, her own voice, her own choices. And her son made absolutely sure she has the resources to live that life on her own terms forever. Von took care of her in life and in death. And when you see her moving the way she moves, living the way she lives, showing up the way she shows up, that is his love continuing to work in her life. That is his promise being kept. That is what legacy actually looks like when it is real. And let me say one more thing before we close this out, because I think it needs to be said clearly. What people underestimate about Tisa is the mental strength it takes to do what she is doing. Because grief does not have an off switch. It does not clock out after a year or two and leave you alone. Especially when you lost your child the way she lost Von. Publicly. Violently. With the whole world watching and documenting and forming opinions in real time. That kind of loss follows you everywhere. It lives in the music your son made that is still playing in cars and gyms and playlists across the world. It lives in the murals you commission so the city does not forget his face. It lives in every interview question that starts with his name before it ever gets to yours. And yet Tisa is out here stepping into her own identity. Not just as Von's mother, but as Tisa, a woman in her own right. A woman who worked hard on her body and her mind and her presence. A woman who built a following and is using it to say real things to real people about real experiences. That transition from being known entirely through your child to carving out your own space in the world is not easy for anybody. For someone who lost a child as publicly as she did, it is even harder. So when people see the birthday photos and want to make it into something negative, I think what they are missing is the bigger thing happening underneath the surface. This woman survived something that most people could not survive with their sanity intact. She is still standing. She is still taking care of her family. She is still honoring her son's name. And she is still, at 50 years old, choosing to be alive and present and visible in a world that would have completely understood if she had disappeared. That is not embarrassing. That is actually kind of remarkable when you really sit with it. The conversation around King Von's legacy has never been a simple one. Von was a complicated person who lived a complicated life in a complicated environment. The allegations that surround his name, the things Mama Duck said publicly, the lawsuit, all of it, those do not erase what he created or what he meant to people. But they also cannot be completely ignored when you are telling the full story. And I think the way to honor both Von and the truth is to hold the full picture without flinching from the hard parts. Tisa carries all of that too. She carries the love and the pride and the legacy, but she also carries the complications and the questions and the weight of representing someone whose story did not have a clean ending. And she does it anyway. Every single day, she wakes up and she does it anyway. That is who King Von's mother is. Not just the woman in the viral photos. Not just the grieving mother frozen in November 2020. A living, evolving, complicated, strong, committed woman doing the best she can with the enormous, beautiful, painful thing her son left behind. If this one hit different for you, and I genuinely think it did, drop a like, hit subscribe, and get in the comments. I want to know where you stand. Are you respecting Tisa's whole journey? Or do you think Vaughn would be pulling up to her page telling her to log off? Let me know. I will be reading every single one. Catch you in the next one.